Hi there, and good afternoon. I'm John.
I'm Zen. And I'm Julie.
We're with C Nation, and you are tuned in to the 50 Days of Cannabis podcast, where we examine the cannabis laws in each of the 50 states.
Oh, hold on, John. You missed one.
I did. The District of Columbia is also included in this. We just thought 50 days sounded a little better than 51. Today we're looking at the cannabis laws in Alabama. The Yellowhammer State is vague when it comes to defining amounts of cannabis deemed quote-unquote for personal use. Beyond that, any cannabis-related charge is a felony, complete with mandatory sentencing guidelines and stiff financial penalties. In fact, Boo is right. It's ridiculously crazy in Alabama. Tell us about it, Zen.
Possession of any amount of cannabis for personal use is a misdemeanor punishable up to 1 year in jail and a max fine of $6,000.
Ouch, $6,000?
Any subsequent charge for personal use or any charge of other than personal use is a felony between 366 days and 10 years in prison and a max fine of $10,000.
That's so crazy. Just the other day, we were, I don't know, Texas or Connecticut or something. They had a $2,000 fine on a misdemeanor, and I thought that was outrageous.
$6,000, yeah.
So tell us about their medical program.
Well, they passed a medical CBD law allowing for the use of cannabis extracts that are high in CBD and low in THC. They treat severe debilitating epileptic conditions, but good luck getting your hands on it because you can't buy it, you can't sell it, they can't prescribe it to you, so good luck with that until they change things.
Yeah, I guess however you can get your hands on it. They won't ask you where it came from, I suppose, but...
as long as you have your card and the amount that you're allowed to have or whatever.
And your epileptic child on hand for their examination, probably. Anyway, at least it's a start, and I know they tried to do some other reforms a year or two ago, and it just got shut down in a hurry. But I want to talk about some of this possession stuff, and I want to really put into perspective how terrible it can really be in Alabama. So, in 2015, more people in Alabama were arrested for possession of marijuana than for any other drug offense.
That
possession.
is insane.
It is. It's crazy. It's like they're just trolling around looking for, people that have, likely suspects. I don't want to say they're profiling, but
but it seems
but
that
perhaps
they
they
kind of
were.
are.
Now, typically that is a misdemeanor in Alabama, unless it's large amounts. We're not quite sure what this personal amount is. It could literally be under that 2.2 pounds. We've seen that explicit number as kind of like the first starting point for their distribution charges. But regardless of that, in that same time frame, 901 of those possession charges became a felony. And when I tell you why, you're going to be really upset. First offense, misdemeanor. Second and subsequent offenses for the same amount, a felony. So a lot of those people were cracked for a subsequent time, and it just flat out became a felony. And in fact, between 2010 and 2015, they handed out more than 5,000 felony convictions for nothing more than possession of cannabis. So that's under their intent to distribute amount, because it's strictly for possession. And this is where it gets really ridiculous when you start to think about this. In 2010, they spent $13 million taxpayer dollars just to enforce their marijuana possession laws. $13 million for
use the money for something
for
else.
Possession. Do they have a program for first-time offenders, drug court, rehab thing? No. They just send them to jail, or they charge them $6,000, $13 million just to enforce possession laws. That is ridiculous. But it gets worse. Tell us about the growers and sellers.
All right, so the sellers. The sale of distribution of any amount of cannabis in Alabama is a felony, punishable between 2 years and life in prison with a 2-year minimum mandatory stay.
Yikes!
Yep. Maximum fines range between $30,000 and $60,000. That's just outrageous.
That is. Now, we accept the word mandatory at face value. It really sounds like it's mandatory. They are no joke. They spell out specifically that the mandatory sentences cannot be waived for any reason, and you will not be given probation or parole at all. 2 years mandatory, 5 years mandatory, 10 years. You are doing that number for a fact.
Let me tell you some more mandatory
Please
if you're
do.
the growers. Cultivation of any number of plants in Alabama is a felony, punishable between 2 years and life in prison with a 2-year mandatory minimum. Fines ranging between $30,000 and $60,000.
Wow.
So if you're trying to grow, sell, have any kind of cannabis, stay out of Alabama.
Well, I guess so. Holy cow. And not to sound like Ron Popeil, but wait.
There's
more. And it's their school zone laws.
Yep.
And man, we always say this is the point where we get serious. And we do take it seriously, but mainly we want you, the listeners, to take it seriously. And in Alabama, you need to turn up your radio and pay attention to this, as it is no joke. The sale, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to ask, what do you think a reasonable school zone size is?
About 1,000 feet.
And think about the youngest
1,500
kids.
feet,
Pretty good.
something like that.
We got kids in elementary school that range from about age 5 to 11, 12, something like that. Fair enough. We like to protect those. So 500 feet, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 feet. We see these pretty standard across the country, and they feel reasonable. 1,500 feet is almost a quarter of a mile. So pretty good distance from a school zone. Alabama says, bah, that doesn't mean anything to us. We're going to call a school zone or a public housing project, by the way, 3 miles.
What?
A 3-mile radius around a school or a public housing project is their defined, pretty much, drug-free zone, their no-sale zone. We were talking about this as we were prepping for this, and we think about our area. So in Utah, we're pretty family-oriented state. We have a lot of children, a lot of school-age kids in our area, and just within walking distance, and I guarantee you this is inside of 2 miles, we counted 2 high schools, 1 middle school, and 4 elementary schools. And 2 of those, the 2 high schools, 1 east of us, 1 west of us, they're the farthest points, maybe a mile and a half. It's crazy. I don't think we could actually drive 3 miles in any direction from where we are and not be in an Alabama-defined school zone. Anyway, as crazy as that sounds, check this out. It is punishable by an additional felony on top of anything else you've been charged with, which it's a felony, it's Alabama. So an additional felony and an additional 5 years in prison. That's mandatory. So now your 2-year mandatory is now 7 years mandatory. And as we pointed out earlier, they are not coming off that charge, and they are not giving you probation in lieu of that charge. You are doing that 7 years. The other component of their school zone law deals with cultivation and manufacturing. For a lot of these charges, they stop short of charging you with their top felony unless they can put a couple of other components together. Otherwise, just cultivation or just processing. Maybe you're taking that cannabis and pressing the oils out of it, etc. That would be processing or manufacturing a cannabis product. Those would be their second highest felony, but they're going to look for at least 2 other things from a list that will cause them to jump that up to their top felony. And school zone, public housing project, etc. is one of those things on that list. If they've got you on that, for starters, they're already going to charge you with that, but you're halfway home on an enhancement on their cultivation and their manufacturing charges. If they can pair that school zone with possession of a firearm, use of a booby trap, be able to call what you're doing a clandestine lab, which means chemicals, etc. And I don't know, maybe butane, I guess, for BHO or something might be considered that. But, this is really very serious, and so serious they've made it a component in other charges to maybe jump that up. So if you had a school zone charge and a firearm, you're getting the school zone charge on top of that, but your cultivation or your manufacturing charge is getting jumped up also to their top.
Because of the firearm or booby trap or whatever.
And that's a 5-year mandatory. I mean, you're looking at 10 mandatory for any of this stuff.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's just crazy in Alabama.
So the school zone, adult.
Indeed. I mean, really.
Kind of hard to be around 3 miles, but
It
still.
is. I don't know what else to say about that except perhaps
Get to a different state that's more friendlier.
Stay out of Alabama. I would pass right through if you're a cannabis friendly person.
And don't be carrying while you're passing through.
Yeah, indeed. You get pulled over. I mean, they're gonna. Who knows? It's probably going to go south for you in Alabama, and that's a tragedy. For a more comprehensive look at the cannabis laws in Alabama, please visit us at cnation.com and click on the state-by-state link.
remember, you have rights if you're arrested for any cannabis-related reason. You have the constitutional right to remain silent until your attorney is present. If you don't have an attorney, ask for one.
Holla.
This is Zen.
And Julie.
And John.
We're with C Nation, bringing you a snapshot of the cannabis laws in Alabama. Be safe.
Stay informed.
And what they said. Shout out to my friend Robert. Roll Tide. The 50 Days of Cannabis podcast is a copyrighted production of the South American Gold Corporation.
We appreciate your likes and shares on social media.
Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at CNation Channel.